Breaking developments tonight. The United States is sending thousands of Marines and an amphibious assault ship to the Middle East as this conflict enters its third week. From what I've gathered, the USS Tripoli is being deployed alongside roughly 5,000 troops, about half of them United States Marines. This task force is currently stationed in Japan. It would take approximately 2 weeks to arrive. This force is specifically trained in amphibious landings and securing maritime choke points. And that is exactly the situation unfolding right now in the Strait of Hormuz, where Iranian forces have been harassing commercial shipping and effectively closing one of the most critical waterways on Earth. A fifth of the world's oil supply flows through that narrow passage, and right now it has ground to a near standstill. I have been tracking reports of tankers being struck, vessels catching fire, and commercial shipping halting entirely because the risk is simply too high. 2 petroleum tankers were left burning in the Persian Gulf after direct strikes, and the footage is devastating. Hundreds of vessels are now stranded in Gulf waters, unable to move. Crews are reporting hearing missile launches and explosions daily from their ships. Marine tracking data confirms the bottleneck. Oil prices have surged to around $100 a barrel. Fuel prices across Europe and the United States have spiked sharply, and there is no sign of relief coming soon. But the American military response has been relentless. United States Central Command has released footage showing wave after wave of strikes deep inside Iranian territory. From what I can confirm, the United States and Israel have now hit over 15,000 targets since this conflict began 2 weeks ago tomorrow. Missile launch sites, air defense systems, and naval assets have all been systematically dismantled across the country. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed this morning that today would see the highest number of strikes yet, and the operation is still ramping up. Last night, B-1 bombers struck deep inside Iran, targeting ballistic missile infrastructure. B-2 stealth bombers have been conducting nighttime raids as well. Fighter jets launching around the clock from carrier decks across the region. F-35s are carving silent corridors through what remains of Iranian airspace. And here is where things get really serious. The campaign is now directly targeting Iran's senior leadership, and the results have been devastating for the regime. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was reportedly killed in the initial strikes. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, was installed as the new supreme leader. But according to Defense Secretary Hegseth, he is now wounded and likely disfigured from subsequent strikes. Sources indicate he has gone underground, hiding beneath Tehran. The Defense Secretary described Iran's leadership as, quote, desperate and cowering, and said, quote, that is what rats do. Nobody really knows who is in charge of Iran right now. At least half a dozen top commanders were eliminated in the first hours alone, but the regime is still projecting defiance. Even as strikes continue, state television showed Iran's president out on the streets looking relaxed, which I found remarkable. A senior regime figure went on air and said, quote, the more pressure Trump exerts, the stronger our nation's willpower becomes. Thousands of regime supporters turned out in Tehran for mass rallies marking Quds Day, carrying images of the new supreme leader who himself has still not been seen publicly. The crowds were enormous, but an explosion struck nearby during a live state television broadcast. Another airstrike landing as a regime official was being interviewed on camera. The humanitarian cost is staggering. The Iranian Red Crescent reports nearly 20,000 homes damaged, along with schools, businesses, and their own facilities. Rescue crews are working through rubble in residential neighborhoods, searching for survivors in narrow alleys. According to the United Nations, more than 3 million Iranians have fled their homes so far, with many crossing into Turkey. And this conflict is not limited to Iran. Israel has been pounding southern Lebanon, targeting what it says are Hezbollah, fighters backed by Tehran. Hezbollah has launched dozens of rockets into northern Israel in response, opening yet another front in this expanding regional conflict. The exchanges have been fierce, with both sides escalating strikes daily across the Lebanese border. Iran has also struck targets across the Gulf. Drone attacks have hit facilities in Oman, where state media confirmed 2 people killed. In Dubai, debris from a shot-down drone damaged a building in the financial district. 45 people in Abu Dhabi have been arrested for filming and spreading what authorities call misinformation about the attacks. Bahrain has been hit repeatedly with explosions near the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet headquarters, sending thick smoke over Manama. Several fires burned at Naval Support Activity Bahrain, and the damage to Allied infrastructure across the Gulf is mounting. What concerns me most is Iran's shift to asymmetric tactics. With their Navy sunk, Air Force gone, and conventional missiles decimated by 90% according to military officials, they are now relying on guerrilla warfare in the Strait, using cheap drones, underwater unmanned vehicles, and proxy forces to keep pressure on global shipping. But make no mistake, their conventional military is finished. And something very interesting is developing. Reza Pahlavi, the exiled former crown prince, has publicly called for nationwide strikes inside Iran, positioning himself as a potential transitional leader. Some Iranians celebrated in the streets after the supreme leader's death, but deep fear remains. Student protests are continuing on university campuses despite the regime's crackdown. The regime held a state funeral for its fallen military leaders. President Trump was asked today when this would be over. His answer was simply, soon. The White House is projecting confidence, insisting this is not Iraq or Afghanistan, that there will be no ground invasion and no nation building. The defense secretary said directly, quote, "This is not 2003, those days are dead, but all options remain open, including diplomacy, though the bottom line is clear. The United States is deploying the full weight of its air power without putting ground forces at risk, at least for now. And in my assessment, that calculus changes only if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Which brings us back to those Marines heading for the region, an amphibious assault ship with 5,000 troops trained, specifically for maritime operations, heading toward the one choke point Iran is still fighting to control. The message from Washington is unmistakable, and President Trump put it bluntly today. Iran, he said, will be hit very hard. As this conflict enters its third week, the question is no longer whether the regime can survive militarily. It is whether anyone inside Iran is willing to step forward and end this before there is nothing left to lead.